Hello, everyone. Another edition of the Audible Market, and today we're continuing our series on the Saab-Gripen offer of Canada. In the previous video, we talked about how basically we have the choose between the F-35s offered by Lockheed Martin and the Saab-Gripen, and in my video, based upon my background in international relations and experience in politics and so forth. As most Canadians, I believe, realize at this point that buying the F-35 is not a good idea. Trump's agenda is to annex Canada by stealth through economic conquest, economic coercion. As he's stipulated before, he's been quite open about that. And the F-35, buying that as a dog's breakfast, basically. If we buy that, we're just going to be accepting Trump's desire to conquer and control us and to coerce us through both through the military, through his technological control of the F-35s, and through his desire to coerce us by trying to, do a series of inroads in the Canadian economy so that he can implement his political and economic control agenda. So the F-35 is definitely going to a quicksand to economic control. Then we have the Saab-Gripen. But in my view, the Saab-Gripen, I think some people are starting to realize more that, we are not simply facing an economic, threat. I think Trump is starting to realize that we're not going to roll over and play dead, that simply trying to conquer us economically is going to take a lot longer than he thinks if it can be accomplished at all. So he's starting now to talk about an envoy that he seeks to facilitate the annexation of Greenland. And just recently, just today, you heard about, CTV report expressing concern that, maybe we are right, maybe we are as Canadians under the threat of an actual military annexation, just like Greenland, maybe, just control Greenland, move into Canada's north and completely take over Canada. I think more and more people are starting to realize that we're not in a joke. So again, going back, we have this Saab-Gripen offer, but in my view, say, okay, let's buy the Saab-Gripen. Let's say Carney says that. Well, do you think that the Trump is going to be waiting around 3 years for us to assert ourselves and to have our opportunity of being able to control ourselves more from a military standpoint? No, he's not going to do that. So in this video presentation, I'm suggesting, and again, right in front of me, I'm not in front of my computer. I have in front of us the Avro Era book, which is an excellent, outstanding book about the history of the Avro. Best thing I could bring, basically gives the insight about that. Many Canadians are thinking about that, like the Saab-Gripen, it gives us opportunity of rekindling the spirit of the Arrow. And then we have our, it's a great book, a lot of great pictures of the Arrow are in there. And we have my book that I got permission to, use the Arrow in its cover. Book called National Identity and Cosmopolitan Community. So basically, what do we need to do? Trump is not going to be waiting around. So the idea that, okay, we're just going to we're just going to reject these F-35s and we're just going to wait 3 years for Saab to start helping us build these planes so that we can assert our sovereignty. That is just outrageous. So I'm going to outline what, in my view, are the steps that we need to do in order to assert ourselves if we choose the Saab-Gripen route, the Gripen route. So here's my steps. Well, let's say Carney, he wants to do the Saab-Gripen. Well, he's already announced that, a desire to have 300,000 citizen soldiers. Well, that's good idea, 300 citizen soldiers, but that's not going to be able to be, we're not going to get 300,000 soldiers instantaneously. And Trump is not going to be waiting around if he's deciding again for annexation. I mean, in World War II, for example, we started off in the Navy. I mean, we became the third largest Navy in the world. And we started off with a couple of thousands of soldiers in 1939. The previous video I talked about this. 1945, we went from 3,000, a couple of thousand soldiers to 100,000 soldiers in our Navy by 1945. And then we had the third largest Navy in the world, which was over 400 vessels, 400 ships. It's quite an accomplishment. So, I mean, given time and, in that 5-year period, we were able to accomplish a lot, but, 300,000 soldiers, I mean, that's going to take some time to bring together. So is Trump going to be waiting around for 300 soldiers to be available to defend ourselves? No. So this is what we need to do. We're going to get this Gripen, and we're going to be thinking about, 300,000 citizen soldiers. We're going to need to shore ourselves up immediately with this Gripen announcement. We need soldiers, we need boots on the ground. In my view, we need to have 100,000 soldiers, and more than we have now, in order to protect ourselves so that we have soldiers available to protect ourselves while we're starting to get the Gripen. I mean, we need to move up that timeline for the Gripen. So we need to move up that timeline and start thinking about 3 years down the road. We need to move up the timeline start building the Gripen. We need to start doing that with Bombardier within months, weeks and months. That's why we have to move up the timeline. So what do we have to do? So we have to move up the timeline of the Gripen, start getting that built as quickly as possible. We need to start thinking about these citizen soldiers as quickly as possible. That's going to take maybe a couple of years at the quickest. I mean, it took us 4 or 5 years in order to get to 100,000. So 300,000 is no easy task. So what are we going to have to do? Well, we are going to need to start to cultivate new military alliances. We're going to need to start bringing troops here who are ready, combat ready, to protect our national territorial integrity. So what do I mean by that? Step one is that we need to, because we can't afford Greenland to fall to the Americas. I mean, that's going to be the end of Canada. We have, the United States takes over Greenland. Then they're going to be moving into the north. They're going to be squeezing us between Alaska and Greenland. So we can't afford that. So number one is we're going to have to, if we're going to be going the Gripen route of affirming our sovereignty, we're going to have to cultivate some kind of Nordic alliance that includes Greenland, Iceland, and the Scandinavian countries. We're going to have to consolidate something. We already have some kind of bilateral military relationship with Sweden now. But we can't rely on NATO to protect ourselves. I mean, do you think that if America's invaded us, then NATO is all of a sudden going to start to invade and do something to the United States? No, we're not going to be able to rely on the NATO bureaucracy to protect ourselves with America. So we're going to have to, create in my view, a Nordic alliance of these Greenland, Iceland, and Scandinavia. We're going to have to, bring some of those some troops from them and says, okay, let's see what we could do to get ourselves militarily ready. Let's start to work together and bring some troops from Norway and Iceland, Iceland, whatever. But they're not going to be able to spare that many troops. I mean, maybe they can help shore us up and speed in the Gripen, but probably not going to be able to bring too many troops from those countries. So we're going to have to do two things. We're going to have to shore up the Commonwealth. We're going to have to be encouraged. He's not doing enough work on trying to champion the Commonwealth. He's doing some great work as far as, going into South America and China and some other diversification he's been doing, Indonesia, but he's not doing enough in Africa. So we need to re-inspire the Commonwealth. We need to get that going back again, the Commonwealth. We need to start getting some military support from African countries and members of the Commonwealth. We need to start bringing some already equipped troops from these countries here Second place we could start to get the military troops is Francophonie. We need to meet with Macron and talk about military, protecting our Francophonie and protecting us from being assimilated and conquered by the United States. We need to start getting troops from Francophonie, from the Commonwealth, and whatever troops that may be available from the Nordic countries. We need to get, in my view, from our bilateral military alliances. In my view, I calculate that 100,000 troops we need to get here as quickly as we can to make sure that we are not, because this is what Hitler used to do. Hitler would blitzkrieg, we call it blitzkrieg, blitz countries militarily when they least expected it, and that's how we conquered them, when they least expected it. So we can't be sleeping at the wheel like that. We need to start, not being naive, stop being naive Canadians. We need to get ourselves in terms of the World War II mentality of perceiving that, okay, now we have the reincarnation of Hitler. We got to get ourselves going here. So we need to get as many troops from our existing alliances, from the Commonwealth. We need to start saying, okay, we'll help you economically. We'll build up trade. We need to rekindle the Commonwealth as a trade hub, and in exchange, help us out with some military personnel. We need to do the same with France and Francophonie. Help us out with military personnel, and if we can get like at least, let's say, 75 to 100,000 troops here and protecting our national territorial integrity, then we're going to be in a position to, okay, we have the troops here. Now we can start to train them, expedite our military personnel and, expedite the Gripen. But we can't expedite the Gripen and expedite our sort of citizen soldiers, because Trump is not going to, and his psychopaths are not going to simply wait around for us to build up 300,000 citizen soldiers. He's not going to be waiting around for us to build up the Gripen in 3 years. We need to get active in NOW. We're seeing again some aggressive moves from him against Greenland with his envoy, and we need to start. We could see as Canadians that he's completely lawless. He's acting just like what Kamala Harris said, and the various people around him. I did an interview with Ty Cobb. This whole fascism that he's embraced in authoritarianism, lawlessness. He's renamed the Defense Department of War. So he is on a war imperialist footing. We need to be privy to that. We need to start responding to Trump as if he were the reincarnation of Hitler, in the same way that we were able to build ourselves from a handful of ships in 1939 to over 400 ships and became the third largest navy. We need to get in that war footing if we are going to protect ourselves as a sovereign nation. So the first order of business is to get as many troops ready in Canadian soil, so that again, when the Gripen is being built and move up that timeline, and as we're training in soldiers, we need to protect our flank. So by cultivating relying on our Commonwealth connections that shored us up during the War of 1812, we relied on Britain, and I know that Britain now is all the British Prime Minister. He doesn't want to offend Trump. So he's trying to playing footsie with Trump. So we can't necessarily rely on Britain to help us out as they did in the War of 1812, but we can certainly rely on better leadership of Canadian leadership in Africa. Again, Carney has been to South Africa, and he's done some little work with Namibia, met with the Namibian leader there, but he's not done anything else for the rest of Africa. So we need Africa more than ever, and whatever they can spare to help us out to remain sovereign. At the same time, we need to start showing Canadian leadership in Africa. have a symbiotic relationship. We need to start getting 75 to 100. If we had 75 to 100,000 troops spread out across Canada, in all our cities and spread out along the West, because I know I saw a very bizarre, weird footage of Trump and one of his executives, and they were talking about, oh, well, let's just take over to Western Canada. We can move in there and just sweep it up and take it over. I mean, this is the kind of sicko people that are leading the Trump administration. These people who are just think that you can just go in a country, just like what's going on with Trump, trying to say, oh, well, let's just go into Venezuela and on the pretext that they're sending drugs. I mean, this is the Hitler playbook. Hitler would make up some excuse that a country was doing something against Germany to legitimate taking them over. This is the Hitler playbook. This is what Trump is trying to do. So what does he do? Oh yeah, you Canadians, are you sending us all that fentanyl? We're going to have to invade you to protect Americans from all the drugs you're coming in, and this is why we're going to have to invade you. We have crazy people like Tucker Carlson, oh, we're going to go in and save you Canadians from yourself and all this kind of stuff, and this is what Hitler people used to do. They would come up with some specious excuse about, that whatever they were doing, it was going to be for the good of the people, and they were just going to invade these countries, and this is the Hitler playbook, and then take them over based upon some outrageous pretext. And when you really want is resources. So we need to, again, number one priority with this Gripen is national territorial defense, to cultivate bilateral relationships, starting with the Commonwealth, starting with the Francophonie, and maybe starting off with an impetus from the Nordic countries. In my view, those three bilateral alliances, we need to start getting troops in Canada. We need to start getting them here quickly, and then use those troops to then enable us to start building Gripens with a much more condensed timeline, and to get our soldiers in a ready capacity, so that we will have 300,000 soldiers in order to defend Canada from a prospective invasion, which is being, in my view, very disturbingly talked about more and more by the so-called mainstream media. And they're not going to be talking about this. Once it's things like weird stuff, that would have been crazy talk before when Trump just got elected, but now it's mainstreaming all this talk of invading Canada. We know what happened to Ukraine when they invaded, when Russia invaded them. So, what's happening right now is that Trump is dividing the world into the Russian sphere of influence, the American sphere of influence, and the Chinese sphere of influence. So that means, let's say, like leaving Taiwan to be controlled by China, leaving Russia to control the Ukraine and maybe parts of Europe, and leaving, in his new Monroe Doctrine, leaving the United States to control the whole of North America and South America and Latin America. This is what's going on here with Trump. So this is what's going on, and we as Canadians cannot be sleeping at the wheel. We need to start mobilizing ourselves, and I think that Trump, Carney is starting to realize that, but he's still a naive streak in him, in my view. We need to start getting troops here quickly. We need to start getting troops available and combat ready across Western Canada, across the North. Across Southern Ontario and Quebec and the Maritime. I heard today that one of the chiefs of the Canadian military started talking about Canadian North, and we can't just leave. Canadian North is great. We need to have troops there, but we need troops all across Canada. We cannot afford any openings for any military attack. We need, again, Saab-Gripen needs to be coupled with a pragmatic strategy to protect our territorial defense, because we cannot take for granted that we're not going to be invaded next week, tomorrow, next month, maybe a year from now, maybe 2 years. We don't know, but we know that the more we frustrate Trump in his desire for economic control, if he thinks that the moment that we start showing ourselves, okay, we're not going to be controlled by you economically, the military, he's going to just be viewing us as the same so-called threat as Greenland, and he's going to just want to just use his brute force like he's using on other Americans to control and conquer. So that's my view. We look forward for your comments about this. Do you think that we need to move up the Gripen timeline? Do you think that we need soldiers here as quickly as possible to protect ourselves from a prospective invasion? What do you think about that? Do you think that we need those troops here to protect our ability to cultivate and train 300,000 soldiers? Do you think that we can't afford to leave an opening for Trump for an invasion while we're building ourselves up militarily? What's your thoughts? Thanks for watching another edition of the Ottawa Market, and we look forward to your thoughts on this. If you thought that this kind of editorial, this monologue was useful, insightful, please consider making us a donation to editor@tubj.ca via e-transfer or PayPal. We can send you a link for that below this video as well. Thanks for watching another edition of the Ottawa Market, and look forward for your comments below. Thanks for watching.